Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports 79 new cases of the coronavirus on Thursday, prompting the government to announce that all public facilities will be closed for the next 2 weeks. Social distancing will be ramped up again if the situation isn't controlled during that time. South Korea's central bank cuts interest rates by another 25 basis points to a record low of 0.5%. It also lowers its projection for GDP growth this year to minus 0.2%. And the Finance Ministry announces more support for the economy. That includes discounts nationwide at small shops and support for the car parts industry and car makers. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The South Korean government announced Thursday that public facilities like parks and museums will be closed for 2 weeks starting this Friday in Seoul, Incheon, and the surrounding province of Gyeonggi-do. Also, entertainment facilities like bars and clubs are advised to close until June 14th. And social distancing measures will be strengthened if the situation is not brought under control in the next 2 weeks. The announcement was made after South Korea confirmed 79 new cases on Thursday. With no additional deaths, the death toll stands at 269, and the overall number of cases has risen to 11,344. As of 11 a.m. today, there are a total of 82 cases related to the new cluster infection at an e-commerce distribution center in the city of Bucheon, Gyeonggi-do Province. Meanwhile, a total of 7 cases were confirmed at a call center in Seoul, where the first case there was reported last Thursday. President Moon Jae-in held a luncheon with the floor leaders of the country's 2 largest political parties ahead of the opening of the new National Assembly. Moon invited Kim Tae-nyan of the ruling Democratic Party and Ju Ho-young of the main opposition United Future Party to the Blue House to hold candid discussions on state affairs. Not much is known about the meeting yet, but issues likely on the table include the economic crisis caused by COVID-19, a third extra budget, and cooperation between the top office and the National Assembly. It lasted more than 2 hours, during which time they also took a stroll inside the presidential compound. Korea's central bank has slashed its growth forecast for the local economy this year to minus 0.2%, which would be its worst performance since the late 90s. It also cut interest rates by another 25 basis points to just 0.5%. Our Ji-young has more.
At the Monetary Policy Board meeting for May on Thursday, the Bank of Korea forecast the local economy to contract in 2020, releasing its revised expected growth rate of negative 0.2%. The revision announced on Thursday is far lower than its previous forecast of 2.1% back in February, down a whopping 2.3%.
The optimistic scenario would be a small margin of positive growth, but in case of the pessimistic scenario, it could result in a relatively large negative growth.
This is the BOK's first negative outlook since 2009, when it said the economic outlook for that year would be negative 1.6%. The only 2 previous times on record that actual GDP shrank were when Korea's GDP growth was negative 1.6% in 1980 and negative 5.1% in 1998. Reflecting the grim outlook of the country's economy this year, the Bank of Korea cut its key interest rate to a historic low of 0.5%, down 25 basis points. The Bank of Korea slashed its benchmark rate to 0.75% in March, but kept it unchanged for April as the central bank opted to monitor the impact of measures already imposed. The downgrade reflects contracted business activities both at home and abroad due to the pandemic.
The rate was cut considering the projected sharp drop in inflation, as the effect of COVID-19 is expected to last a while.
The central bank's Monetary Policy Board noted in a statement that because of the effect of COVID-19, consumption has contracted, exports have slowed, and unemployment has risen, particularly in the service sector. The Bank of Korea's governor said its forecasts assume that the outbreak will peak in the second quarter and then settle down, and that there won't be another large-scale outbreak in South Korea. Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance ministry has rolled out new support plans for a wide range of industries. That includes a nationwide shopping festival to revitalize local consumption. Kim Dami has more.
To boost sluggish consumer spending, South Korea will hold a nationwide shopping festival for 2 weeks at the end of June. Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said Thursday there'll be a variety of special sales online and discount coupons for use at small vendors and traditional markets.
We expect this will help lift the burden on big and small distributors, as well as the local SMEs and small business owners who are struggling due to the pandemic.
And to support local auto parts firms, the government will set up a guarantee fund worth more than $400 million to prop up their sales.
The government will protect the auto industry by supporting those with great technical capability but who struggle to thrive because their low credit rating prevents them from borrowing.
And to help car makers, the government will buy around 9,500 vehicles for its own use earlier than planned this year. For the shipbuilding industry, the government will upgrade some 30 older vessels into eco-friendly ones. They haven't forgotten sports either. Loans for sport-related businesses will be expanded by around $60 million. The finance minister said he will announce plans early next month for revitalizing exports, including quarantine kits, and the upcoming policy direction for the second half of the year. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, Professor of Economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, thank you for coming on today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
So this is the Bank of Korea's second interest rate cut this year, the last one back in March when the pandemic was really picking up steam, down another 25 basis points. Tell us more about this decision.
Bank of Korea is implementing quite aggressive expansionary monetary policy to keep step with government's also expansionary fiscal policy. Today, Bank of Korea slashed this policy rate by a quarter percentage point to a record low of 0.5%. Of course, this rate cut is for stimulating economy as country's economy is expected to grow at the slowest pace after economic crisis of 1997.
Yeah, and speaking of growth, the BOK said it now expects GDP to contract this year by 0.2%. This is the first time it's said that since 2009. It's also the first such projection from a major public sector entity in Korea.
Bank of Korea today updated its economic growth rate forecast of this year from positive 2.1% in 3 months ago to negative 0.2% today. This huge change in economic growth forecast indicates that Bank of Korea expects COVID-19 shock will continue to hurt local economy down the road until next year. Bank of Korea also has added current situations of GDP components like consumption has remained sluggish, export has fallen significantly, and recoveries in facility investment and construction investments are both subdued.
Yeah, and the government's trying to turn that around. As we often discuss here, there are concerns about the government's fiscal soundness going forward if it does go ahead with a third big budget for this year, and it is planning to do so. So what do you make of that?
Since coronavirus pandemic is hitting Korean economy very hard in an unprecedented way in its scope and its strength, it is necessary to increase government expenditure to revive economy. And government is about to turn in the third supplementary budget proposal to Congress, even though its size is not exactly known yet. But given this situation, the government's policies, top priority is given to expansionary fiscal policy and fiscal health issue became something forgotten. But before implementing expansionary fiscal policies, it is important to draw the limit of government debt increase because it is our children who is going to pay back today's government debt.
Indeed. Well, switching gears a little, it's shaping up to be a good week on Wall Street. Despite the tensions with China, all three main indices up on Wednesday. The Dow breaking through 25,000 for the first time since March. S&P back up to 3,000. What's the story in the global markets?
As the United States economy has begun reopening and higher expectations on coronavirus vaccine development, U.S. market went up on Wednesday's market. Dow Jones Industrial increased over 2.2%, and Nasdaq also increased by 0.8%. And all European markets, including London, Frankfurt, Paris, increased over 1% on Wednesday. But Shanghai and Hong Kong markets all declined today due to escalating conflicts between Washington and Beijing.
And now Korean stocks started off higher this morning, but by around lunchtime that had turned around. What happened there?
In today's morning session, KOSPI and KOSDAQ all increased, and that was led by chip producers like SK Hynix and Samsung. But in the afternoon session, domestic markets turned to downside, even with Bank of Korea's interest cut. And the domestic market ended with KOSPI's negative 0.1% and KOSDAQ's negative 2.2%. I think these negative returns are related to Bank of Korea's updated negative economic growth forecast for this year, and increasing possibility in China and U.S. trade war in the near future.
Indeed, it also seems the situation in the coronavirus has caused a little bit more alarm here at the moment in Korea. Professor Kim, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, jobs have been wiped out all over the world, but the age group hit hardest has been those between 18 and 29 years old. That's according to the International Labor Organization, which says action is needed so that an entire generation is not set back. Kim Do-yeon reports.
In a newly released report, the International Labor Organization says 1 out of 6 young people between the ages of 18 to 29 years old have lost their jobs as a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the worst among all age ranges, and women are more affected than men. However, the head of the organization said that given the circumstances, it wasn't that unexpected.
The situation of young people, and it's hardly a surprise, we see that young people have been the hardest and the quickest hit on the labour market, starting already from a very bad place on labour markets.
Even for those who remain employed, their working hours have decreased about 23%. In regards to total working hours, the first quarter reported a 4.8% on-quarter decrease. This is equivalent to approximately 135 million full-time jobs, assuming a 48-hour working week. The second quarter is forecast to drop 10.7% compared to the fourth quarter of 2019, equivalent to 305 million full-time jobs. On a regional basis, the Americas, Europe, and Central Asia lost the most working hours. Another major hurdle this young generation is facing, on top of the general economic woes triggered by the virus, is a disruption to their education, which poses a threat to their future employment prospects. Some are coining this generation of young people the lockdown generation. The head of the International Labor Organization says significant actions need to be taken right now to try to rectify the situation, or the virus impact will last for decades. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.